So we're Lindsey and Tim Baker, and we run True Reverie, which is a fashion and lifestyle brand which celebrates life and culture in Wolverhampton and the Black Country. We both were born in Wolverhampton, and we've lived in Wolverhampton all our lives, and we just felt that there was an opportunity really to create something that allows people to celebrate where they're from and celebrate the good things in Wolverhampton.
We wanted to create a positive statement for Wolverhampton and shine a light on the things that people probably don't celebrate enough. So things like the music scene, the football team, some of the stories as well, like the Stone Roses stories, a lot of like infamous and famous things that happen in Wolves.
And the music scene is something that we just thought is completely not mined at all. And there's so many stories that we've been able to uncover, really great history for the city.
I think people are so down to earth in Wolverhampton that they're reluctant to show pride and shout about what's good and be proud of that culture that's here.
We need to shout about the good things that have happened. One of the biggest things that we've uncovered through our work with the Music Archive was talking Tony Perry from used to run the Lafayette Club. I remember my mum and dad talking about going to the Lafayette, and so I'd heard of it but didn't really realise the resonance of it, because it was an absolutely leading club.
I think it was Britain's premier club outside of London in the 60s.
They were really visionary when they started it. It was on the circuit for all the bands, the people like Fleetwood Mac, Led Zeppelin,
Scott Walker,
the Sex Pistols played there. It was
Stevie Wonder.
There's a story that Stevie Wonder went there for drinks afterwards and got up and did a few tunes on the piano, and it's just
it had a kitchen there, and it was the only place in the Midlands where you could get steak and chips after midnight. So all the touring bands would go to the Lafayette, even if they were playing in Birmingham or whatever, and they would have some food there and have a late drink. So it was
and Robert Plant and John Bonham would always end up there. They were really visionary in the way they morphed and changed with the time as well, because it sort of started off with that kind of band scene, and then I think it moved to more like disco and soul and
ended up with punk.
So Sex Pistols played there twice, I think, as the spots.
Yeah.
We spoke to Tony, and it was just really enlightening to hear on our doorstep there was such an amazing venue, and you just think, why is it not celebrated more, and why is there not a blue plaque on the building? And through the Music Archive, we've spoke to lots of different people about different nights that happened.
Yeah, because you've got the Catacombs as well, which was like the forerunner to what Northern Soul. It was like Northern Soul before it was called Northern Soul, basically, but it sort of erased a little bit from that history. Probably Northern Soul wouldn't have existed without the Catacombs.
And people used to travel from all around the country to come to Wolverhampton to these clubs.
Wolverhampton Civic Hall is a really special place for us.
We met at Blast Off before mobile phones existed.
Yeah.
So we met one week and then had to just say, should we meet here next week?
No, it was 3 weeks? 3 weeks later. It was 3 weeks later. Going to Blast Off was always a special thing as well. It was always like a massive achievement when the whole party got in and everyone was really excited just to get in. Once you got in and the lights and the smoke would hit you. And
that was my favourite part, walking to Blast Off when there was no one on the dance floor. And at that time, they'd have all films projecting around the outside of the Civic Hall,
and then you'd be straight to the bar to get see what was on offer that week. Like Red Stripe would be £1 or whatever.
I think as we get older, we probably are more nostalgic about it, but it was a massive part of growing up. It was music was the main thing. Really.
My main ambition as a young musician was to just get my face on the Blast Off flyer at that point. Even the end of the night, sitting outside and you could smell onions because Mr. Sizzle's van was over the road. And my first ever proper gig was at the Civic Hall. And that was Ian Brown. It was either 99 or 2000. I can't remember too well, but I remember that being a really sort of life-changing moment, or just affirming that I wanted to be, in a band. We sort of caught the end really from the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s were probably the zenith of that sort of youth culture, music connection. You could tell what music someone was into by the way they looked. And you had to discover bands by reading the NME and taking a punt on stuff in a record shop.
The sort of the Civic, the Wolfram and the Little Civic at that time were just brilliant, because you had massive bands at the Civic, you know, you had really good bands at the Wolverhampton, and then you could go and see bands that were up and coming at the Little Civic. Like, I was thinking this morning about seeing the music at the Little Civic, and I just remember that gig being absolutely amazing. It was such a good venue, and like with the chandelier and all the old posters on the wall. There's just so much history in that building, and so good to grow up having those three venues on our doorstep.
The Little Civic and the Varsity were a bigger part of it, because they were like our pre-blast off places on a Saturday. Some of the greatest gigs we saw at the Varsity would be Cooper Temple Claws, who was supported by Biffy Clyro at the time, who've obviously become a huge group. Who else did we see at the Varsity? They were good days. Thank God camera phones didn't exist.
I think that's the thing, when you're younger, you don't sort of like take it in how good it was as well.
We missed quite a few gigs there. I know Oasis played there, didn't they? That was just a bit before our time. And Queens of the Stone Age played at the Varsity. It's a lot of local band nights as well, wasn't it? Sort of like, we played there a few times. It was always always a great venue to play. It's like a proper little venue. They had, you go up the stairs and they had a back bar. The dressing room was always quite big. You used to get paid in beer. But yeah, I remember Noel Gallagher played there with his band Tail Gunner.
We saw quite a few good bands at the Wolverhampton as well. Yeah. Dandy Warhols.
We saw Dandy Warhol,
Wax,
Doves,
Primal Scream.
You'd always get a T-shirt outside for a £5, haggled off a Mancunian chap. Wolverhampton's probably my favourite venue in Wolves, actually. Yeah. We saw Primal Scream in there, didn't we, doing a festival warm-up show, which was amazing.
We saw Spiritualised. That was so lovely in Wolverhampton Hall as well. It was just the right size. What
they used to do at Blast Off is, if you got in there early at Blast Off, they'd always do ticket giveaways for Wolverhampton gigs. Yeah. And you'd have to go to the DJ and request a song, and you'd win tickets or whatever. So we always used to get in early to get these tickets for these Wolverhampton gigs. So we saw the Brian Jones Massacre there as well, didn't we?
We went to see New Order at the Civic.
You saw
and I saw Travis there as well. I do remember the crowd was that busy for Travis that I was literally picked up off the floor, like just suspended off my feet.
So the first record I ever bought was from Mike Lloyd's Megastore, and I was 11, and my older brother was into more grungy stuff, so he was into like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and stuff, and my younger brother was a bit cooler, he was into the more Manchester stuff. So I went in there, and the two bands I had in my mind were Pearl Jam and Oasis. And I couldn't find Pearl Jam, thank God. And I found Definitely Maybe on tape. And I took that home, played it as an 11-year-old. And that literally changed my life, really did. I remember playing it in my dad's car on the way home. I can still see it in my mind now.
We've tried to find photos of Mike Lloyd's, and they don't exist, do they?
No.
Because
there's nothing out there.
There's nothing. And it's just like, oh my God, that was such a massive, like, we'd go uptown every week and just spend like an hour just standing in Mike Lloyd's looking at the same CD.
They did like package gigs, didn't they? So you could buy a coach ticket and
that's right. It was like a ticket.
And they had all like these cool posters on the stairwell. And my mate like nicked a couple of posters and sort of got caught on the door, which I had to like pretend I wasn't with him. So my first band was called Money Gun. 1999, I think we formed. We would have been like 16. And our first very gig was at the Little Civic. And it was with a band called Powder. Then we played with Snow Patrol, played with a band called The Stands, who released a couple of good albums in the 2000s, who supported Oasis. We played with Crispian Mills after he'd come out of Cooler Shaker, and he did another project called The Jeevers. But yeah, we played with quite a few of the up-and-coming bands at that time. The Datsuns was another one, a band from New Zealand. So all these bands that sort of came through Wolves, we were sort of desperately trying to get the supports for, and it was kind of like a really good breeding ground to learning your craft. It's kind of a crying shame that Wolves hasn't got that sort of small grassroots venue now where you can play to 100 people and just, find your feet and learn your stagecraft.